Spiritual Direction from Dante, Avoiding the Inferno, a book by Father Paul Pearson of the Oratory. Canto 32. Topics: the gradual freezing of love, the enduring power of hate, the pain of betrayal, as good as our word. Exactly how and when a heart hardens seems almost mysterious, but the reality is obvious. We reach a point of no return, a place at which our heart no longer can be melted by kind words, tender memories, or a generous action. Something has died inside. The heart can become petrified or frozen, and when this happens, it seems frighteningly inhuman, and the actions that flow from it are almost incomprehensible. How could a person even think of doing that? Because something inside has died. But it dies one small act of bitterness and unforgiveness at a time. Freezing rarely happens in an instant. In line 1, here the evil is beyond the power of expression, even for someone of Dante's literary talents, because it is beyond human comprehension. The things that we consider the most important, the noblest, are precisely what are rejected here. The bonds which are the closest to our hearts have been willingly broken by these sinners. Such treachery leaves even Dante speechless. It would do the same to anyone who calls Mama and Dada, because anyone who has done so, anyone who has known the love of parents, knows by experience the depths of these personal connections. And what evil is needed to tear us away from those closest to us? And how is this a choice worth making in the minds of these sinners? Because it is a choice they made. Dante, suffering the pains of exile, finds it difficult to imagine for himself and, as a result, difficult to put into convincing poetry. As has been so often the case, the imagery of the sins punished here actually precedes the experience, preparing the reader for what he is about to encounter. True malice, evil done wholeheartedly, is almost mysterious. We are left to face this same mystery when we ask ourselves how Adam and Eve, content in their paradise, could possibly have chosen to rebel against God. The question is even more perplexing when we ask it about the angels in heaven who joined Satan in the Great Rebellion. Shouldn't they have known better? Shouldn't they know that God is their true happiness? And what they are pursuing will make them miserable, both now and forever. What could lead a being with such special knowledge, with such special grace, free from all taint of sin, to choose something evil? There are few questions in theology more difficult than this one. And that is why Dante calls on the Muses to inspire him. Figuring out this puzzle will require supernatural guidance. Ancient thinkers held it as truth that the corruption of the best is the worst. It is better to have been created a lesser being, to have been given less, than to have been given so much and lost it. These souls appear to have abandoned all that makes them human, all that sets us apart from the beasts. These words also call to mind our Lord's words when he speaks about someone leading astray one of his little ones. Matthew 18:6 says, "It would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." In line 16, as in the beginning of Canto 31, Dante doesn't recognize what he's getting into. He's still staring back at the giants lined up against the wall of the deep pit into which he's just been set. And he walks distractedly from where Antoninus put them down and is startled by a voice coming from an unexpected direction. At his feet. The words turn his attention downward, where he first notices that he is walking on a lake of ice, smooth as glass, but seemingly very strong, not fragile or brittle. Although he hears the words, he does not immediately place the voice of the one speaking. He reveals the exact location of the speaker, only later. The full horror of this canto comes as a surprise. Dante first describes to the reader the voice he hears, then the ice he sees, and finally, in an almost teasing fashion, reveals the fate of the sinners punished here. Again, he begins with an image rather than merely with a stated fact. Like frogs in a pond with their snouts sticking out of the water, the damned souls are frozen in the lake up to their necks. Their suffering is almost ridiculed, treated as something less than human. Their chattering teeth are like the clacking of stork's bills. Their teeth are chattering with the cold. The reference to being livid, gray, and fixed in the ice up to where shame appears reminds us that these treacherous souls could do the most outrageous evil without even blushing. They were shameless while on earth. Now the cold takes away the color that would provide even the appearance of shame. In line 37, it says, "Each held his face down low." This suggests some sort of shame, but we'll come to see that it is a part of the hiddenness of fraud. They never let their true face be seen. Their tears are evident because of the cold, and as soon as they are shed, they freeze. No one is more attentive than a lover, except perhaps a hater. Human beings can hate with an intensity of focus that can become obsessive. Hatred in our heart drives us to the object we hate and binds us to it with a horrible tenacity. Love might fade, but hate seems to live on. Can we afford to give room in our hearts to something so destructive and controlling? Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27 says, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil." In line 40, we see two sinners locked in a parody of a loving embrace. They are so close that their chests are pressed together, and their hair has grown into one snarled mass. They have the outward appearance, and only the outward appearance, of unity. They have rejected the human bonds that they appear to represent. Here their tears of self-pity and frustration rather than of repentance, form part of their punishment. They freeze, locking the eyelids in place, impeding the sight of the sinners. They were blinded just as truly by their selfishness on earth, blinded even to the bonds of blood and kinship. Here, their tears of self-pity serve as instruments of their punishment. It is painful to be let down by others. Everyone hopes to receive understanding and basic compassion from other people, even those whom we've never met, whether they be police officers or bank tellers or tax collectors. But when we do not experience this fellow feeling from those closest to us, that is more shocking and hurtful. As the psalmist wrote, "It is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend." From Psalm 55, verses 12 and 13. This sort of treachery shakes the very foundation of our world, leaving us exposed and alone. The human race has had to live face to face with such treachery since Cain slew his brother Abel. Whatever doubts we might have had about these two souls and their apparent unity, whatever pity we might have felt for their tears, quickly disappears because of their head-butting. These are two brothers, each responsible for the other's death. Here they are doomed to be in each other's company for eternity. Their ties of blood, which ought to bring them consolation, bring only rage. It is fitting that this ring, the ring of traitors against family, fraud against the double bond of humanity, and family relation, should be named after Cain, who instituted the sin of treachery against his own flesh and blood by the murder of his brother, Abel. "What mirror are you staring at in us?" the treacherous soul asked Dante. Perhaps there is also the suggestion that Dante looks at the suffering souls but sees himself reflected in them. The souls must think that Dante could be there only in the circle of hell if he too had been condemned for treachery. The first soul to speak to Dante here, a soul who had lost his ears to frostbite, remains anonymous himself initially, but he is only too ready to rat out the two souls locked in the embrace. He'll name names. There is no fellow feeling or sympathy among the souls condemned here. He's ready to make all the others seem worse than he is. And to avoid further questioning from Dante, the soul identifies himself as Commissione de Pazzi. Only now does Dante seem to be aware of the huge number of souls here. What he sees at his feet is not unique, but only one of 1,000 examples of treachery. He'll never be able to look at a frozen lake in the same way again. In line 73, Dante uses both fire and ice in the description of hell. Ice might be an unexpected punishment for those accustomed to the more traditional hellfire, but the cold here in the place of treachery, however, seems particularly appropriate. All human warmth was extinguished in these hearts long ago, even towards those who should have been most likely to inspire them with love and affection, their family and friends. Treachery is also not the sin of a moment. It is the result of resentment cultivated, grievance nurtured, or schemes plotted over time. A passionate man might decide upon his plan in a fit of rage, but might also be turned away from his course of action. The treacherous man, on the other hand, is immovable on his decision. Nothing is allowed to stand in his way. His will is as permanent and unshifting as ice. The sins that are punished with fire are of a very different sort, usually sins involving the passions. The sins punished here are not the sins motivated by passion. They are committed with a certain cold-bloodedness that makes sins of passion appear far more understandable and far more human. The poet Robert Frost, in his famous little poem called Fire and Ice, artfully presents both sides of the debate over imagery for hell, and it says, "Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I will hold those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough to hate, to know that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice." There is an old saying of unknown origin that says, "You are only as good as your word." What we say and what we promise matters among social beings. In our richly interconnected human world, many of our links with others are ones we enter into voluntarily. We pledge our loyalty to another. We make alliances to fight for each other, and we join together into cities and nations. We often speak of these as being a matter of social contract, but every contract is ultimately a result of choice. If these arguments freely formed mean nothing, then where are we? In line 76, as he walks with Virgil, Dante kicks the face of a soul stuck in the ice. He's quite coy about it and how exactly it happens. If it was fortune, deny, or will, who knows? One might think Dante himself would. But he leaves us to decide the matter for ourselves. Is it more than a coincidence that this man betrayed Dante's party in battle? He certainly leaves open the possibility that he kicked him intentionally. Here we have entered Antenora, named after a Trojan traitor, the second circle of the final ring, where traitors against country are punished. Dante places traitors against country lower in hell than traitors against their own families. But why? The bond of family is more natural, more deeply seated, but the bond of party, nation, or country is freely entered into. As the saying goes, you can't choose your family. To violate a bond freely entered into is a greater offense against our rational nature, and more malicious than violating a bond over which we have no control. But why this injury? Regardless of the betrayals this soul has committed against his own country, he still expects to be treated fairly by others. Baccia shows all the self-centeredness of the treachery. The good of others can be sacrificed for his own advancement. He breaks the rules, even the most basic rules, and still expects others to play by them. In 91, he says, "But I'm alive." Dante tries the same tactic he has used successfully so often. He promises to make sure the memory of this soul continues on earth. But here, such an offer isn't welcome. And they say, "I crave the opposite. You don't know how to flatter for this pit." Here, the rules are different. Traitors know they will receive no thanks for their actions and no pity for their sufferings. They want to disappear, to remain anonymous. But Dante continues his prying for information and won't allow the sinner any privacy. He will make sure that he is exposed and his name recorded. Resorting to physical violence yet again, Dante yanks out clumps of the sinner's hair, but elicits no response from him. Silence matters more than suffering. This desire to remain unnamed or anonymous is not any shame they might feel for the crime. It might explain why these souls have their heads bowed to the ice. It is one of Baccia's fellow sinners who reveals his name just after clumps of his hair has been pulled out by Dante. It seems obvious that he does it out of malice. Baccia immediately reveals the identity of the soul who named him, fighting back with the only weapon he has, stripping him of his anonymity. And once the malice begins to flow, he identifies many others, even though they had done him no wrong. The insulted thug turned stool pigeon. No loyalty and no pity for others, merely spite. Lack of loyalty was part of his sin, and this defect remains forever reflected in this soul. And should we expect anything different from someone so malicious against his own people? And moving on, we are yet again shocked by the imagery before we get the details. Dante sees two men frozen in the same hole, the one gnawing the head of the other. And Dante says, "So did he gnaw the brains, the flesh, and the skull?" Dante is intrigued, as we are. Again, he offers the opportunity for the story to be told, but he has learned an important lesson here. Revealing the evil of the enemy is more important to the one he is addressing than keeping alive his own memory. "Tell me," Dante says, "what your story is, and I will tell the world just how horrible your enemy truly is." Spite, not clearly one's own name, is what motivates here.